Well, this is Dr. Dave Maslach talking to you about reciprocity.com. The E is written with a 3. And in this particular video, I want to talk to you about whether you should do a PhD in marketing, management, or organizational behavior, and sort of give you some tips to thinking about applying to doctoral programs. So if you don't know me, I am an associate professor of innovation strategy and entrepreneurship, and I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There were so many people that helped me out to get through graduate school that I wanted to pay the favor forward and help you out. All right, so one of the followers of this channel, Eric Yu, writes, could you help to give some advice on applying to marketing PhD programs? All right, so if you don't know the rules of this channel, you have to go out and do something nice if I answer a question in the next hour, and then just put some comments below in terms of the things that you did that are nice. It doesn't have to be all that big. It could be picking up garbage, giving somebody a high five or a hello on the street, and just do something that's random and nice to somebody and see what happens. And it's gonna be more for you than it is for me. All right. So in terms of applying to marketing PhD programs, first of all, that's awesome that you're thinking about that. And I would consider, or I would suggest a couple of things in terms of thinking about whether you should apply to different PhD programs. And this is really meant for anybody that's thinking about going to graduate school in any sort of area, but especially business programs, because that's kind of what I know, but applies to a lot of different areas. All right, so the things that you should be considering if you're applying to different PhD programs, doctoral programs around the world. The first thing that's really important is the productivity of the faculty. And there's lots of different metrics that you can look at in terms of productivity of the faculty. But here are, sort of two things that are really important to consider. So overall productivity, and that might be things like publications, for example. It might be being on editorial boards, might be on, I don't know. It could be any number of different things, number of conferences that they go to, things along those lines. That's what you're looking for in terms of productivity. How many PhD students that they've had in the past? That's an important one. But then you also want to look at the productivity per capita or productivity per faculty, and that's going to give you a much different number than you are in terms of looking at just straight productivity, because there are some business schools that are ginormous. And I'm not going to name them because that's going to throw them under the bus, but you all would recognize all of those schools because they're so ginormous that their efficiency doesn't have to be that high, right, in terms of how many people that they're working with. And then there's other smaller programs that they are just not going to be, they're never going to be there because the number of faculty is just not that large. But they could be extremely sort of productive faculty, or, that they're just in a really hot sort of area. That's what I would consider sort of your first thing to look at. Is the publications. And then as well, you want to look at sort of where they're publishing at the same time, right? So not all journals are the same. That's really like way off in terms of, there's huge variance between them. Not to say that there's like, some of them that there is just like large differences, let's just say that, in terms of quality and effort to get into some of these journals, and you want to just look at those, and you determine where they are. You can look up which ones they are in your particular field, right? But if you're going into marketing, for example, Journal of Marketing would be the big one that you could look at, right? So that is just by default, it's a good journal. But then you also want to look at, like, maybe it's American Journal of Sociology, like kind of weird things like that people actually publish in. And you'll see that in, bigger schools or more prestigious schools are going to be sort of going into those areas. So somebody might be a marketing professor, but they might be publishing in psychological science, for example. And it really does vary that way, but you just have to look at that and sort of get a good judgment of what that is. In terms of, specifically into marketing or specifically into management or organizational behavior. So management is broad, right? So that P could be sort of macro, which is what I do: organizational theory, strategy, innovation. And management could be micro, so organizational behavior, sort of industrial psychology, those kind of things. You would be looking at that kind of stuff. So it's really broad, and encompasses a lot of different things. But you can sort of look at the different places that you can publish in, and sort of get a good measure or a good sort of understanding what that is. In terms of specifically thinking about marketing, the other thing that you want to look at is what are the sort of topical areas that these people are thinking about, and they should closely match with yours. And so you can watch some of my older videos where I talk about this kind of stuff in terms of figuring out what you're interested in, research topics, things like that. That's a really important thing. So it doesn't necessarily mean like sort of productivity is and I'm really not a big fan of just looking at productivity measures. I think that they could be way off. Sometimes they're pretty somewhat okay predictors, but there's lots of different factors that go into what is productivity. And so you might actually want to think about, the research interest, first of all, in whether that's actually an important thing for you. That might be a good start in terms of that. But in general, you're going to see differences, pretty big differences across the board in terms of productivity, and then also research interests. So first of all, if you're going into marketing, you want to narrow down so you want to think about, okay, what am I interested in terms of marketing? Am I interested in, maybe it's, customer relations, for example, and I'm not a marketing person, so it's kind of an odd thing for me to talk about, but maybe you're interested in decision making. Well, there's tons of people that are interested in decision making that are in marketing, and you'd want to look at sort of consumer decision making, right? And so how people actually make decisions when they purchase things, and look to see at what people are doing there. Maybe it is online decision making, and you'd want to look at, people that are doing online decision making and narrow down the people that are doing that and the sort of faculty that are doing that. And that's where I would start in terms of thinking about, different programs and where you would go in terms of answering that question, right? And as well as sort of productivity loosely understood, because there's lots of different factors, and you'll understand a little bit more what I'm talking about once you start getting into this in terms of productivity, metrics and stuff like that. There's all sorts of ways to, there's a lot of variability. Let's just go that in terms of sort of massaging those numbers and getting the right numbers that you want to get, and just even sort of selecting the niche area that you're in, right? So you could be the best school in marketing and just choose to do marketing, for example. And this is, tricks of strategy. You could sort of specialize marketing and then sort of show yourself that you show other people around the world that you're the best in marketing, or you can sort of say that you're the best in, marketing to fishermen off the coast of Maine, and you're the top researcher for marketing to fishermen on the coast of Maine. And if there's somebody that's doing that, I'm not sort of picking fun at you, but basically if you narrow it down and change the niche, then you can get different metrics and different numbers and sort of show that you're really productive in one area versus another. And it's a really easy way to sort of, change that kind of stuff. Okay. The other thing to look at is the placement of the students. And this is probably a bigger one in terms of you and thinking of what's going to happen. And there's huge variability even at the programs in terms of placements that they're going to. So you might be at the top program in the world, and there's going to be some people that are going to go to, lower tiered schools, and others that are going to go to higher tier schools. And there's a lot of variability in that, but that's going to be kind of a rough estimate in terms of where you're going to go after that. And it's giving you just kind of a rough estimate on what you're going to do after in terms of places that you can go to, right? So if you go to the University of Timbuktu International School of, business administration, then you want to look at okay, where are they placing their PhD students? And then, from there, maybe they're only going to X, Y, and Z schools in Timbuktu. Well, then you're going to have to go to Timbuktu. And so you're just getting a judgment on where they're going. But if they're placing people all around the world, then you have kind of an idea of that. Or if they're only placing to, maybe it's a local sort of geographic region or this kind of school or whatever it is, and you kind of have a good understanding of what's going on, right? So that's when you want to look at placement of the students. You can even contact PhD students. They're going to be helpful and nice. So take that back. 3/4 of them are probably going to be nice and helpful, and a quarter of them are either not going to respond or they're going to give you some sort of negative response. And the ones that give you a negative response, nuts to them. It's not you, it's them. It truly is that case if that does happen. All right, so you want to look at that in terms of what you're going to do in terms of productivity, and looking at those real outcomes is really important in terms of what's going to happen in going forward. The third thing, and I think this is probably a lot more important, that as I've been in this program and doing this kind of stuff a lot longer, I think it's a lot more important, is the culture of the program. And the cultures of different programs varies dramatically. It's like companies, right? So some companies do have a really cool culture, and other ones don't have a cool culture, or some of them have a culture of being this kind of way, and another one has it in this kind of way. And it really varies across the different programs, and across the different universities, across the different colleges and schools and all that kind of stuff, disciplines that you're in. And so you want to look at that and sort of get a good sense of what the culture is within the different, maybe it's within the different disciplines, for example. Sometimes there's a lot more sort of cultural differences. Sometimes there is, and you just want to get a good sense. And what is culture? Sort of that, it's kind of hard to sort of put your fingers on, but it's kind of the glue that holds everything together. And that's what it's kind of loosey-goosey in terms of the definition. But, it's the stuff that sort of matters in terms of what's going to happen to you when you're there. So the culture could either accelerate your performance and make you feel like, oh, this is amazing and I'm having such a good time. Or it could make it such that I'm like, this is like the worst thing I've ever done. And why am I doing this? And you want to get a good sense of that when you go there, right? Like you just, and that's where, when you're applying to them, you're not going to have a good understanding of what the culture is, but maybe it's the interview. So when you go for those interviews, just realize that the interview is just as much about you in terms of figuring out what's going on as it is about them sort of getting a judgment about you and get a sense for you. So that's what I would think about when you're doing that. You just kind of want to get a good sense that, are they friendly kind of individuals? Are they helpful for you in terms of, is it going to be shut off a lot of times? Do you feel comfortable talking to these individuals? All things like that are sort of good measures of what's going on in terms of the culture of what's, just basically getting a good sense of, am I going to fit in here? And, if that's the case, or if it's not the case, then really think about that. That is important. This is your life in terms of what's going to happen. It's not all just about performance at the end of the day, but it's this sort of cultural stuff that matters in terms of, mental health, in terms of, how you feel about yourself, in terms of just many different factors. And that's often the culture of the school, the institution, is going to determine what is going to happen in terms of outcomes in the future. And it takes a long time in terms of building that culture, in terms of, people being excited to be there and, asking really deep questions and being curious and all that kind of stuff. But the programs that have a really culture for that, then they end up, it just grows and it becomes a big thing. It might be sort of a decades long sort of building thing, but once they get there, then you really recognize it in terms of what's happening. And there's some schools that definitely have that, and others that have a different kind of culture that don't have that as much, right? So you just want to sort of have a sense for this. Like every company that's out there, every company is different. So they're all unique, and same with institutions or schools. That's what you consider. So in terms of, choosing marketing or organizational behavior or management programs or whatever it is that you're looking at, you really want to consider, what are you interested in? And, are you interested in sort of micro things? So happening at the individual level, the dyadic level between individuals and maybe it's a customer, or individuals and sales teams, whatever it is. That's going to maybe lead you towards, marketing stuff. Are you interested in sort of macro stuff? So, what happens at the firm level, for example, that's going to lead you to strategy and, in that particular field. And we just look at it. We look at similar things, Very similar things, but we just have slightly different bends on them in terms of what field to go into. And you just want to get a good sense of that. And the way that you get a good sense of that is just read a couple of the articles that these people are doing in those fields, right? So go find somebody that resonates in terms of management or strategy, or maybe it's organizational behavior versus marketing versus strategy or organizational theory. Read a couple of the articles that people are publishing in those particular areas. So you could look at sort of mine for mine's kind of it's kind of more mainstream sort of innovation-ish, but which is kind of strategy. So you can look at some of those if you want. Or there's all sorts of people that are way more famous than I am, right? Jay Barney. I don't know who are the people that are really like rock stars in marketing, but you can look at some of their stuff and see what's happening in terms of just look at the citation counts, or you go to somebody that's at a really famous school that you recognize, look to see what they're writing about. In marketing, the same thing with organizational behavior, see what they're writing about and see which one kind of resonates with you. So I'd read maybe 2 articles in each area, in each domain. You'll get kind of a sense of what people are talking about and, that sort of area. It just gives you a little bit of a, which way am I kind of leaning towards, right? I know it's a decision making based on very small samples, but that's how we make decisions often. It's not generally the way that we take, a sample of 30, which I recommend for you to do, by the way. So read 30 articles in one, 30 articles in another, 30 articles in another, and you can have a really good sense. But and that's how you can get a statistical significant difference between them. But in terms of actual making decisions, just read a couple in each area, and you're going to have kind of a sense of what people are talking about and where to go in terms of what resonates with you. And the other thing is thinking about the faculty that you are, that you're thinking of working with. Get a good sense of who they are, whether they resonate with who you are as an individual, not just like the topical area. That will come, and you'll get a better sense as you keep working at it, and it just kind of develops over time. You'll get a sense of where you're going to go, and once you're there, once you've been in it for a year, and you're like, God, I don't like this at all. Switch. It's not a big deal, right? Like, you're better off to switch early on and make any of those sort of changes early on within a year or two than you are 15 years later and you've developed your name in this area and you realize you don't like it. Just do it now. People might recognize you for, maybe a year or 2 or 5 years. It's like, that was a person that did that. But other than that, in terms of switching, don't worry about that as much. You have to follow what you're interested in and keep going with that. So that's what I would do. So Eric, you hopefully this helps you with terms of thinking about applying to different marketing PhD programs around the world, or management, organizational behavior PhD programs. I have lots of advice or lots of sort of insights that you'd want to consider. Just go and watch some of those other videos. Again, the rules with this channel: make sure you go do something nice, write some comments below, and let us know what you did. Any of you who have watched this video, same thing. If you watch this video, write some comments below of things that you've done nice. That's all you have to do. Give me a thumbs up. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right, take care, and have a wonderful day.